I'm David Thornburgh, President and CEO of the Committee of 70, Philadelphia's longstanding nonpartisan advocate for better government. We've got a primary election coming up on May 21st, a little more than a week from today, and a lot of folks running for office. Last count, 28 council at large candidates, a good number of district candidates, certainly the mayor, city commissioners, et cetera, et cetera. And we've been doing our best to talk to as many of those folks that want to talk to us in the form of a job interview, because the way we look at it is when you run for office, it's like a job interview, and the voters are the hiring committee at the end of the day. So today we're pleased to be joined by Councilwoman Maria Quiñones Sánchez. Thanks for being with us, who represents the 7th District here in the city of Philadelphia. So on a rainy Monday, we'll not talk about the 76ers, but I guess we start all of these job interviews off with the most fundamental and basic question. In your case, you're an incumbent. This would be your 4th term that you're running for. Why are you running?
Well, as someone who entered council in a very progressive slate in 2007, when then Mayor Nutter got elected on a bunch of issues of reform and those work, I feel like my work is still not complete. While we've done transformative work around business tax reform, land use, I still believe that affordable housing and some of the issues around narrowing the gap around poverty and having government better serve those most in need is still work that I need to complete.
And what have you learned in your 3 terms?
Well, I often use the term the bureaucracy trips over itself, right? It's a Titanic, right? The mayor said that to me. This is like Titanic. And I said, well, it's your Titanic, and we have to get it moving. I think government sometimes loses a sense of urgency. That's why I ran with the sense of urgency, transforming how government views itself and how it communicates with the constituents and the voters is slow, right? And I think we've done some very progressive things, whether you talk about language access and really making government more global, being able to speak in multiple languages, the municipal ID and welcoming immigrants. I think we've done some things that have really opened up government. This administration around open documents has been better, but I still think there's more work to be done in those areas. I believe more transparency about financial interest statements for candidates. I'm glad the issue of employment and an outside employment has come back to bear. As a mother, this is my full-time job. I go home and I have another full-time job, and sometimes I do get frustrated with other folks who have more flexibility to have outside employment. So I think all of those things are legitimate questions that should be asked and people should debate.
So you've not been afraid to raise your voice or to pursue an independent path when it feels, I guess, worthwhile. You work in a legislative body, though, at the end of the day. If you're going to move a piece of legislation, you need 9 or 12 votes. So how do you balance those two? Your desire to speak out and chart your own course and the need to build consensus and support.
I think this is hugely important, and one, as I listen to particularly aspiring council people, as they talk about how they're going to come in and revolutionize council, right? And the freshman 15 and ended up being 100 items that I shared with Councilman Jones and Bill Green. One of the things I learned is you have to listen and care about what your colleagues care about, and you have to be a good advocate so they care about what you care about, right? And so I consider myself the progressive pragmatic, right? Mm-hmm. Sort of like we're not going to ram things down people's throats. We're going to do things that are in the best interest of the 7th, but that are also in the best interest of the entire city. And those don't conflict. They really don't. I think I often tell my colleagues, and it really pleases me when they talk about the issues in my district that are impacting my constituents, and they're understanding that if my district is doing better, the entire city and neighborhoods are doing better. That comes with time, understanding, some patience. I often remember my progressive folks wondering why I had a very good relationship with Donna Reed Miller and Joan Krajewski, and I said, because I listened. You took the time to listen about what they care about, and most of the times what they care about was as important to you. That's probably the thing that was the most important to them, but it was just as important to you too. There were issues that needed to be tackled. So, I often tell the new candidates, you need 9 all the time. 6 will get you to 9. Most of the time, when you're doing transformative work, you need 12.
Yeah.
And I've been very, very successful in my legislative record because I do listen to my colleagues and try to get a win-win.
Yeah.
The notion of winners and losers is not one that I subscribe to.
Mm-hmm. So you have or are about to complete 3 terms in council.
Mm-hmm.
So not that you're thinking about legacy in terms of the whole sweep of your career, but what are you most proud of having accomplished in those 3 terms?
I was thinking for me, when I came in, I really was very clear that I had to create toolboxes, right? Toolboxes that I could use more aggressively than my other council colleagues, but transforming business tax reform in the city and really looking at how do we create better incentives for businesses that are located in the city of Philadelphia, which is, and really working with the chamber through that, because they had really set the course of business taxes in the city. And, we did some independent studies and research. We can debate the policy, we should debate the numbers, and we looked at how the disincentive for businesses to be located in the city of Philadelphia. So changing that course was hugely important. How we do land use with the land bank. And, I know that it's been a slow start, but having an annual articulation of what our district by district goals are with what they have gets us to that transparency. Income-based payment plans. So UPA was something that we authored, and now the nationally recognized TAP program really sends a message to long-term, the working poor, that government is not going to take you out of your house. We could do that and help a whole lot of folks in the city of Philadelphia, and send the message that Philadelphia is a welcoming city and we want new people, but we really do appreciate our home ownership rate and the working class community in every neighborhood.
Let me double back to the land bank, because you were one of the principal architects of the land bank, and that was a pretty big boulder to push. Are you disappointed? It feels like there aren't maybe as many either deposits in the land bank as we anticipated or hoped. And then, of course, if there aren't deposits, it's hard to withdraw.
Yes. Well, I think one of the things is when you're going to change and transform how we view this, it's usually important that the executive buy into it. And I felt that both in the last administration and this administration has really been slow to embrace it. Whether things are in 5 buckets or 1 bucket, having one process is the executive's responsibility, right? So people who understand the chaos, and sometimes chaos works for people, continue to operate in that, because we haven't given them a pathway to this is a streamlined process, right? And that was one of my biggest disappointments during the whole land bank compromise, which was, we can have several different boards approving this, but they should all have one goal and one mission. And the fact that I have to annually budget money to the land bank so that they write a check to the revenue department so that I can get the land bank to acquire and clear title is what I'm talking about, the bureaucracy tripping over itself, right? That shouldn't be necessary. I can't get my colleagues to cooperate and put everything in the land bank if it doesn't work. I have a backlog of hundreds of properties that we've authorized and cleared that people have not done settlement. So I'm always torn, because I want the toolbox to work, and this is definitely one of the areas that I will focus in if reelected, but the executive has to be willing to make it work. And one of this thing about competitive sales, and I know on its surface it seems like, yeah, why can't we compete? Because there are people who've been waiting for years for government to get their act together, who've been taking care of property, and they should not be put in a competitive process. We can be transparent and direct in everything if we articulate as part of the land bank requirement in the strategic plan what our goals are. I have 4,500 properties. Don't need to build on all 4,500. Clearly, some should be affordable. Some should be small business expansion. We spent a lot of time talking through with residents in the different communities what they'd like to see in that. And so the notion that then I have to be competitive to be transparent, it's not so. people know what they want to do with this land.
Yeah. Let me take that as a lead into the last set of things I want to talk about with you, which is a set of issues around transparency, accountability, results, access to the voting process. About a week ago, the Committee of 70 put out a number of proposals around those, dealing with issues which no stranger to you, councilmanic prerogative, transparency in council, opening up the voting process to make sure that all voters can vote in primary elections, doing something about ballot position, which, as you know, has a huge influence on particularly elections with a lot of candidates. So focus maybe on councilmanic prerogative, since you're a district council person and it involves the land bank. Where are we on that? Where do you think we should be?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm not going to sit here and say that folks have not managed this process the best that they can. I think we have a lot of work to do with that. But let me talk about councilmanic prerogative, right? If you're that resident where in a neighborhood where someone wants to put a nuisance establishment, something that you're against, we're having that debate of safe injection site, you want me to have councilmanic prerogative. I think where we have to move to, and I've done this, is the remapping and the zoning remapping that needs to take place in every neighborhood where, you know, we passed the zoning code reform and we haven't remapped neighborhoods. I'm 90% remapped, right? And what does that mean? That means that over the last 11 years, we've been thoughtful. We've had a lot of conversations and moved neighborhoods from what they don't want to what amenities they do want to see. What is the kind of businesses they want? Because that's what allows the predictability both from the resident side and from the folks coming in and investing. So we're 90% there, using planning principles around open space and all those other things. So that's where we have to move to, right? How do we get that predictability and the transparency so that people know, right? And that residents in the neighborhood, it's easy to activate people against things. It's much harder to have a thoughtful conversation about what their neighborhoods should look like 5 years from now and 10 years from now. And we've done that in the 7.
You mentioned the magic word maps. We've been very active around the Commonwealth, around the redistricting reform. The governor asked me to chair a statewide commission, and we've been traveling all over the place. So political maps are surprisingly on people's minds these days. We're going to have to remap the council districts after the next census. Some folks have said, well, you know, there's a call out there to get citizens more involved in mapping those districts. And we're one of those because it feels like people should have a say in the territory in which they're going to be represented. So how do you feel about
one of the things that I always feel, and I was very active after Help America Vote Act, participated in many lawsuits in some cases around bilingual ballots and opening up those processes, right? So this is one of those areas that I love to talk about because there's so much work to be done. The mapping that no one wants to address is the political subdivision mapping of wards. They have not been remapped in 40 years. They just added a division in the 18th ward in an area that I share with Council President Clark. That, I argue, leads to more of the gerrymandering around subdivisions, around districts, particularly in cities like Philadelphia. In the counties, much different. They have a different geographical challenges because of space. You know, they don't have the high density. But I've had this discussion with a lot of the folks from Fair Districts and others. Why is it that the Republican and Democratic City Committee have not remapped in 40 years? So those wards, right, where you have A and B and all those other kind of things going on, why are we not requesting transparency at that level? And I would argue that would help a lot in creating better even council districts. I look
those are the building blocks of the council.
The 42nd ward is a perfect example. You know, to their credit, the former ward leader Elaine Tomlin was very active in this, and for Sharon is complicated. You know, she's divided by the boulevard, and so I represent some of the district, Councilwoman Bass represents some of the district, Sherelle Parker represents some of the 42nd ward because the 42nd ward no longer reflects the kind of neighborhood feel. So yes, you know, more participation. People should understand how people map each other. People should question why a district like mine has none of the riverfront. and only certain people have part of the riverfront. Those are economic engines. These districts are designed, right, around economic engines and anchors. And why do historically poor districts don't have that is a discussion we should have. A lot of it is attributable to the ward structure.
We struggle, just as an editorial comment, around processes that are controlled by the political parties.
There are parties.
Well,
it's
I know.
still a public process.
I know, but it's more difficult to affect those because it's not.
But it's unfair then to expect us to create districts that reflect, the voting rights statute is all based on communities of interest. And the wards no longer represent common communities of interest. And so working around it at a time where people are really calling out on full transparency, ownership to parties. I mean, you have, I never get party endorsement. It's still my party. I still register and participate. You have wards that are saying to the Democratic Party, you no longer represent my interests and we're independent wards. I think this is the time to begin that conversation.
One final quick question. This would probably involve a state level change. But do you support allowing independent voters to vote in primary elections?
Absolutely. When we were working on Help America Vote Act and we fought for language access and bilingual ballots across the state, open primaries, same day registration, we had a whole list of things. And Camden does it all the time. And they move with Help America Vote Act. I watch states all across the country, Connecticut, New Jersey, really become creative about absentee ballot, mail voting. And I watched Pennsylvania double down on its, tradition.
It all goes back to our election code written in 1937.
Exactly.
Speaking
So
of
I'm with
overdue.
you. There's at least 10 low-hanging fruit that would make people feel better about the process of voting.
Councilwoman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Once again, primary election coming up May 21st. It's time to make a plan to vote, to encourage your friends, neighbors, relatives, anybody you can think of to make a plan to vote. And to make it easier, you can go to our website, 70.org. You can find our world-class voter guide, our digital ballot tool, and you can also download the We Vote app to your phone so that in the palm of your hand, you can have everything you need to be a super voter on May 21st and beyond. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the polls.